I am 100 years old. That number tends to land differently depending on who hears it. For some people, it sounds abstract, like something from a history book or a trivia question. For others, it sounds heavy, like a warning. When I say it, I don't say it to impress anyone. I say it because it's true and because it shapes everything else that follows. 100 years means I have watched the world reinvent itself more times than I can count. It means I have lived through silence and noise, scarcity and abundance, simplicity and excess. It also means I have had a long time to think about how people age and why so many of them disappear long before their bodies fail. Let me ask you something. Do you know what a nursing home smells like? Not just in passing, not the way you imagine it might smell, but truly know it. There's the sharpness of disinfectant, the artificial cleanliness that tries too hard. And underneath that, there's something harder to name, a kind of surrender, a sense that life has been reduced to a process. Something important has already ended, even though people are still breathing inside those walls. I decided a very long time ago that I would not end my days that way. I didn't want my life reduced to a schedule created by someone who had just met me. I didn't want my independence traded for convenience. I didn't want to become quiet because no one was listening anymore. So I made a different decision. And then I spent decades living in a way that supported it. My name is Evelyn. I turned 100 last spring. I still live in the house my husband and I bought all those years ago, back when the neighborhood was younger and the trees were thinner. I wake up each morning in my own bed. I know the way the light falls across the floor at different times of day. I know which floorboard creaks near the hallway and which window sticks when it rains. I make my own breakfast. Sometimes it's simple. Sometimes I take my time. I pay my own bills. I open my own mail. I decide what stays and what goes. I choose when the television stays off and when the radio fills the room. At night, I decide when I've had enough of the day. No one tells me when to sleep. No one rings a bell to signal the end of my independence. That matters more than people realize. I'm not here to offer anyone a miracle. I'm not selling a supplement, a routine, or a philosophy that promises eternal youth. I don't trust shortcuts, and I never have. I spent most of my working life as a librarian. I lived among facts, not fantasies. I learned early on that what lasts is rarely flashy. What lasts is steady, it's quiet, it's often overlooked. I believe in preparation. I believe in showing up even when it's boring. I believe in doing the unremarkable things over and over again, long after the excitement has faded. That's how I lived my life, and that's how I stayed in it. People often say avoiding a nursing home is about luck. They say it the same way they talk about good genes or fate, as if independence in old age is a lottery prize. Luck is comforting. Luck absolves you of responsibility. If it's all chance, then no one has to plan, decide, or confront uncomfortable truths. But this has nothing to do with luck. It has everything to do with choice, with structure, with foresight, with building systems early, long before the word decline enters the conversation. It's about paying attention while you still have the clarity to do something with what you notice. This was never about denying my age. I've never pretended I was indestructible. I didn't chase youth, and I didn't try to outrun time. What I wanted was control. Not control over the inevitable, but control over how much of myself I retained as the years passed. I wanted a plan that protected my independence, not a vague hope, not a promise I made to myself once and forgot. A deliberate plan, a disciplined one, something I returned to daily, whether I felt motivated or not. This was never about staying young, it was about staying in charge. I learned the importance of that watching my mother. She was a strong woman. In her prime, she was the center of our family. People looked to her before making decisions. Her voice carried weight. She remembered birthdays, resolved arguments, and held the history of our family in her mind. But as she grew older, she began putting things off. Decisions could wait. Conversations were postponed. Planning felt uncomfortable, so it was delayed. Each small delay seemed harmless at the time. But small losses of control have a way of stacking up quietly. Eventually, she ended up in a home. I watched it happen piece by piece. Her world became smaller. Her opinions were no longer asked for. Her days were shaped by schedules she didn't write. She went from being known to being managed, from being a person to being processed. I remember standing there watching her sit in a chair she hadn't chosen, listening to a conversation she wasn't part of. I felt something settle in my chest, a clarity that was painful but unmistakable. I looked at that future, saw it for what it was, and thought very calmly, "No, not me." Most people think aging is something that happens to you like weather rolling in overnight. You wake up one morning and suddenly things are different. I never believed that. Aging isn't passive, it's active. It's something you participate in every single day. Whether you realize it or not, you can age deliberately, or you can drift. You can approach it with intention, or you can let habits make decisions for you. I came to understand that growing older is a skill, and like any skill, it improves with attention and practice. So I made a choice early on. I decided not just to get old, but to do it well. I never believed in extremes. I didn't punish my body, and I didn't ignore it either. I wasn't trying to outrun time. I was trying to resist decline one ordinary day at a time. The truth is simple, and it isn't gentle. The moment you stop using your body, it begins preparing to shut down. That process doesn't announce itself. It doesn't cause immediate pain. It's quiet. And because it's quiet, people miss it until it's too late. So I kept moving, not dramatically, not competitively. I walked every day. I carried my own groceries. I tended my garden instead of admiring it from the window. I stood when I could have sat. I treated movement like maintenance, not exercise, like oiling a machine so it doesn't seize. Every day I sent my body the same message: you are still needed. I treated my mind the same way. Your mind is not a keepsake meant to be admired for what it once was. It's a working instrument, and unused instruments fall out of tune. When I stopped working for a paycheck, I didn't stop working altogether. I made it a rule that retirement would simply mean redirecting effort. I read every morning. I worked puzzles that irritated me. I learned things that had no immediate purpose. Curiosity keeps the mind alive. When curiosity fades, competence follows. And when competence fades, people begin to treat you differently. They speak more slowly. They explain things you already understand. They stop asking your opinion altogether. I refuse that. A working mind protects your dignity. It keeps you present. It keeps you in the conversation. Loneliness, though, was the most dangerous threat of all. Loneliness doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't knock. It seeps in. It convinces you that you're no longer necessary, that the world will continue just fine without your involvement. And once that belief settles in, people begin to disappear while they're still alive. I felt that danger after my husband died. The house grew quiet in a way that felt unnatural. The days stretched too long. It would have been easy to retreat, to close the curtains, to let time pass without marking it. Instead, I made a rule. I had to speak to another person out loud every single day, not a greeting, not a transaction, a conversation. I scheduled phone calls. I showed up in the same places week after week. I volunteered. I became inconvenient. Connection isn't about comfort, it's about staying visible. Finally, there was preparation, the part most people avoid. Decline is not optional. Pretending otherwise is the most dangerous fantasy there is. I didn't wait for a fall or an emergency to force my hand. I prepared while I was still strong and clear-headed. I modified my home before I needed to. I organized my finances. I put everything important in writing, my wishes, my limits, my decisions. My children know where it all is. Preparation isn't pessimism, it's responsibility. It removes confusion, it removes panic. And it preserves choice when choice becomes scarce. This was never about avoiding a building. It wasn't about resisting help or proving strength. It was about authorship, about remaining the one who decides how life is lived, even as it narrows. This is about dignity, about autonomy, about continuity, about remaining the same person in charge of your own days for as long as those days exist. I'm sitting in my living room as I say this. My books are where I left them. My memories line the walls. The light comes in through the same windows it always has. I made tea this morning. I'll decide when I go to bed tonight. I am 100 years old. I'm still here in my own space, living inside a life I recognize as mine. Nothing about that happened by accident, and I can tell you without hesitation, it was worth it.